Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on Season 1, Episode 1 of the brand new Titans TV series based around the Teen Titans comic characters, the comic book group, and, simply entitled Titans for this first episode. And let me start off by saying this is something that, for a long time coming, going back to the earliest sort of set leaks and promotional imagery, the teasers, all that stuff, every step of the way I have been largely tentative and apprehensive about everything we've seen about this. There's so much of it that I really haven't just jived well with, really hasn't rubbed me the right way in any way, shape, or form. Maybe with the exception of the character portraits of Robin, Dick Grayson, and of course Beast Boy. I think those were probably the closest two out of all of them to resembling anything I would be familiar with, recognizably as the Teen Titans, or, excuse me, just the Titans, since there's only like one teenager in this cast, for the most part. And so getting into this first episode, finally sitting down and watching it, I was very surprised, or I should say unsurprised, to learn that my expectations, those lower expectations, as Mad TV once put it, were very much bottomed out by watching this. The only somewhat redeeming thing in the entirety of this first episode was Dick Grayson, was Robin, to a point. And he wasn't even perfect. He wasn't even a perfect personification for me of that character necessarily, but he was the closest to the mark, of expectations, of familiarity, and things like that. And the thing that I was struggling with the entire time watching this was, like, is this supposed to fit in with, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League, that sort of framework, that sort of universe? Is this its own separate thing? I don't really know, but it seems like the dark, gritty, edgy for the sake of being edgy thing, they wholly embraced in this. And, the characters and the characterization really suffers for it from the get-go, at least as far as I'm concerned. Because pretty much all of the characters, the bad guys and the purported good guys, the Titans themselves, are highly mysterious, enigmatic, and unlikable throughout the entirety of this, with, again, the exception maybe of Dick Grayson. There's a couple of character moments where it's like, he kind of lets his hair down, he lets the veneer down a little bit, and you see the twinkle behind the eyes of who he was, before being hardened by Bruce Wayne, by Batman. And you can kind of see where he's coming from, to a point in not being able to relate with Batman anymore, and not being able to follow Batman along on that journey of seeking justice and just beating the hell out of people. I think the conflict, to a point, is a little bit minced, in the fact that I'm not sure, is Dick saying that Batman wouldn't go the nth degree and take lives, and that's what he doesn't agree with, or that it was just he can't necessarily sidle himself up with Bruce's personal journey, and he needs to find his own path and that kind of thing. Because a lot of what we see Robin doing in this first episode, going after child predators and things, as well as gangsters, but most notably, as a detective, he's hunting down criminals who got off, with charges of probably sexual assault and being a child predator and those kinds of things. It seems that this has become his life work, for the most part, as an extension of what he was probably taught by Bruce Wayne, having been, sort of a child victim in the sense that he lost his parents, the Graysons, the Flying Graysons, and I guess, at some point he grew up and he realized he had to forge his own path. He couldn't live in the shadow of Bruce Wayne anymore. But again, there's a conflictual aspect to that characterization where it's like, I don't quite know, is that all there is to it as far as why he doesn't see eye to eye with Batman? Was there something more? I was getting sort of Ben Affleck Daredevil movie vibes with the way he follows the gangsters down the back alley and he beats the hell out of them. And then, of course, you get the F Batman that was in all the teasers. Edgy for the sake of edginess, that kind of thing. This is a dark, gritty world, man. And that kind of thing. And I've heard so many people talking, about Man of Steel, that iteration of Superman, and Batman v Superman, and things of that sort, and what they would have expected of a strictly, non-Joss Whedon affected Justice League movie, the Zack Snyder cut and all that kind of stuff. Their expectations have always been, and they're sort of in the derogatory, their estimation of that is dark and gritty for the sake of dark and gritty, whereas I would argue there was always a sense of realism. If these characters really existed in the real world, there were boundaries, there were lines that probably shouldn't have been crossed, along those lines. But I feel like this show just eschews all lines, all stoppages. It just goes no holds barred from the first, 5 minutes of the episode, seeing Sherilyn Fenn's head get blown off right in front of the camera, right at you, which took me aback. And things like that, like the brutality, especially surrounding Corey Anders, this show's iteration of Starfire, which herself, you didn't get much of a sense of personality. I'm sure the actress whom I'm not familiar with, this is going to be my debut to her acting prowess. I'm sure she was cast because of her acting talents, her capability of range and things like that. But I feel like we see none of that in this opening episode because she's like amnesiac. She doesn't know. She wakes up in a car that got driven off the road. Bullet holes are barred into the doors and everything like that. And she has no memory of anything that led up to that. And conveniently, she happens to be looking for Rachael, or, this show's version in any case of Raven, of course. And why? Why was she saddled up with, how long was she saddled up with these foreign land gangsters and all this kind of stuff? None of it makes any sense. None of it is explained. She knows as little about it as we do, and it doesn't help her character. She's beating the hell out of a guy she has in a closet. She's held captive in a closet at this posh hotel, which she has reserved the entire top floor of. How does she have money? Did it take sleeping with these gangsters that she later goes to the club and nukes them with her abilities that she doesn't even know how to use and everything? And that's another aspect of this with each of the characters in this episode that have powers. The overall impression is with the Rachael character, the Raven character, she knows she has something dark and evil inside her, but there's a lack of control. With the Starfire character, with Corey Anders, she's amnesiac. She doesn't even seem to know she has powers. Then they emit from her, and she just kind of chuckles as she leaves this room where these guys were pointing guns at her, and the lead boss guy was professing his love for her, and after she nukes them, she just laughs it off. There's an aspect to that I tap into. I'm seeking and I'm searching. I'm desperately trying to find something to grapple onto that is recognizable in the personification of the characterization of Starfire, of Corey. And that is probably the most alien aspect of her character, in that one moment where she does dismissively laugh it off, chuckle, and leave as she realizes, okay, apparently I'm looking for this little girl, this little Raven girl. No idea why, no idea how I know these people, and all this kind of stuff. But her dismissiveness, that is something that is sort of a touchstone, I guess you could say, of Starfire from the comics. There is this level of disconnect, and that was the only moment in the entirety of all of her scenes in this first episode where I got a sense of that, but at the same time, it didn't make her in any way likable, or approachable, or relatable. Even Dick Grayson, because of his standoffishness and everything, with the exception of those one or two moments where he takes sympathy on Rachael, who comes to Detroit. That's where his base of operations now is. And, because she's had these nightmare visions that have woken her up at night and everything, leading to him just by happenstance. She throws a brick at a cop car because she's getting a bad vibe about this woman who tried to sort of take her under her wing at a homeless shelter, a food pantry kind of thing. And she's got these visions and reflective surfaces of the darker version of herself, telling her to kill people or run away, and it's a trap and all this kind of stuff. So there's so much conflict inborn within her, which is something reminiscent of the Raven character, of course. But the coincidence there that it leads her directly to Dick, who is, you know, someone within her visions and everything. And it kind of was confusing if she detected his Robin background or not, because she kind of looked at him after like touching his hand at one point, you know, when first going and asking him for help and revealing all that she knows about him. And of course he's incredulous, thinking, who put you up to this? You know, who's trying to mess with me here? You know, that kind of thing. When she has that sort of connective vision by touching him, the way she looks at him afterward, I had gotten the impression like, oh, did she just figure out he's Robin too? You know, like, is there some kind of psychic link there? But I have no idea, you know. But his going back and trying to find her when she is effectively kidnapped again from right out of the, you know, police department, whatever it is. And then this, you know, this bald guy who's like, he knows about the evil residing within her, and he has to, like, he's made it his mission that he's going to take her out. He's going to kill her by putting her heart next to a beast's heart and an imbecile's heart or something like that, and then burning them all, closing once and forever the doorway to the dark side, you know, to her father and all that kind of stuff, if you know anything about the Raven lore. And so there is lore involved in it all. But, you know, like, I never felt for her at all as a character. I felt more so for Dick's wanting to help her as an extension of his wanting to help all of these abused and probably murdered, in some cases, children, which has kind of been a leftover aspect of influence from Bruce Wayne, from Batman, and having worked with him, you know. So again, it just, there's so much characterization in conflict, trying to wrap my mind around the feel, the vibe, the brutality, the gore, the gruesomeness of all of this, the lack of personality or relatability in the characterization of pretty much all of the characters that you witness, you know, from beginning to end. And at you know, sort of the beginning, like with the opening dream sequence that the Rachael Raven character is having, I mean, it kind of looked like you know, a fan production on YouTube that you might see. Like, the effects weren't that great, and when you get to the end, the final scene of the episode is our debut to Garth, to Beast Boy. I don't even know if he's going to be called Garth in this, frankly, but he's tigered out in, like, I guess a rental movie place or like a Best Buy or something, you know, that kind of thing. Like, it has all video games and DVDs and Blu-rays and all that stuff. And so I guess the whole purpose of his doing that was to effectively shoplift a game, an Xbox game that he wanted, and he like thinks it's all rad and everything. But even in that moment, like after he scares the security guard who's playing video games and whatever, and he makes his way out, and he's like, he transforms back to his human form in the woods, just, you know, like behind the place or whatever. He seems surprised, like, oh, I'm glad it worked. Like, I'm glad my powers, you know, like, does he have to concentrate and think of a goal? And then when he transforms into an animal, it's you know, who knows what's going to happen if it works the way he hopes it did going into it. Is he going to be surprised every time because he's not quite used to his powers? And it has a sort of X-Men Mutants vibe to it in that effect where, you know, I would have expected some of these characters to know and recognize that they have powers and legit want to utilize them for, you know, heroics, for saving people and selflessness and things like that. And there's an overridden vibe whenever I think of Titans, of this light, not necessarily without any sort of dark, more dramatic themes, but a more lighthearted, you know, sort of characterization and aesthetic in the storytelling. There were definitely darker and more dramatic stories that, you know, they did tell in the comics, and even the Teen Titans animated series adapted some of, like the Judas Contract and things like that. which were groundbreaking, of course, but I mean, it just, there doesn't seem to be any humor, any personality to this. There were just a few small sprinkles all throughout of things that I was like, why can't there be more of that? I liked that. I liked that moment. I liked that moment. Everything else was a big WTF, a grand WTF that I couldn't jive with. I couldn't vibe with. And it was not an enjoyable experience, to be quite frank. Now, I am going to watch more of this show in the hopes that it will pick up, that it will become better. I've seen some talk about Hawk and Dove appearing in episode 2, and you know, that they're a little bit more likable, a little more approachable, perhaps, than the characters thus far were in this debut episode. And I can only hope that's the case, because this was a hot mess as far as I'm concerned. It wasn't good. There was nothing really redeeming out of it. You know, at least anything that was very minute compared to everything else, which I just found problematic and lacking in tone and personality and characterization and things like that. So my lowered expectations remained that, you know, all throughout watching this. I didn't have any sort of change of mind or anything, or any, you know, unexpected enjoyment out of it. And we'll just have to see, man. You know, I hope it gets a lot better for an underwhelming and just borderline distasteful premiere episode of a team of characters I love and adore. And I don't know, I can't really speak to if it's that fact that I have this familiarity and this estimation of the characters, because I'm somebody who can watch, you know, the Christopher Reeve Superman film. I can watch Man of Steel. I can watch Superman Returns. I can watch all different kinds of you know, interpretations. You know, the 2009 Star Trek, the original series Star Trek. I am familiar with a bunch of different versions of characters and a bunch of different versions of stories, and I'm always highly adaptable to that. So I don't think there was any sort of prejudice in my going into this. In watching it, I turned all that off. I let go of any sort of character estimations or expectations I might have had. And of course, I was looking for some familiarity, but I mean, it was just lacking in all of those objective sort of things. You know, a compelling story, you know, sympathetic characterization, anything that I could really latch on to, any sort of excitement or enjoyment, and that sucks. This episode sucked. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you've seen the first episode of the brand new Titans series, what you thought of it. You know, love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. But I would be highly intrigued to find out if, especially if you're familiar with the Teen Titans, in any estimation, whether it be the comics, the myriad versions of them in the comics as they have existed, or like the animated series and things like that. Young Justice, which in its own way, you know, revolved around the Titans and such like that. What you thought of it as compared to those estimations. Do you think it is the lowest on the totem pole, as I do after watching it? And with that, I'd like to ask if you would consider supporting my channel. If you'd like to see videos like this in the future, it would help me greatly if you would take a look at my PayPal contribution link in the description and the comments below, to keep me afloat in this time of YouTube uncertainty with, you know, copyright takedowns and channel shutdowns and demonetizations and things like that. This would be a direct line to supporting me and let me know that you like what I do and you'd like to see more of what I do, and anything you saw fit to contribute toward my efforts on YouTube would be very much appreciated. So yeah, with that, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and fuck Batman.